Hi everybody, lovely to have you back on this today's bit of content. I am super duper excited about today, and I'm going to share with you why. I have a guest, and this isn't just any old guest. This is an amazing guest, one that actually I worship the sort of the ground he walks on. He might or might not know this, but I was lucky enough to have training from Andy Bounds. I had to dig out my CV. It was that long ago. It was 15 years ago. I was absolutely blown away by not just his training, but I had 3 days of bespoke in-house training from Andy. If you don't know Andy, he is an award-winning sales trainer, presentation trainer, and leadership trainer as well. And I had a quick look on his website, and this testimonial will probably just blow you away in itself. So Andy Bounds taught me about effective presenting more than a lady who had previously taught to US presidents. So if that doesn't impress you, then you might as well leave now. He's impressed me for the last 15 years, and whenever he's sharing his tips on social, my team know that I'm going to be sharing his tips with him. So hi Andy, it's fantastic to have you here today, and I'm very lucky and very excited, if I haven't shared that already, to have you on today's session.
Well, thank you. That is the nicest introduction anyone has ever given me to anything. So keep talking, Lindsay. That was lovely.
Let's do more. So, so Andy, I've known you for 15 years. Obviously, we're not in daily contact, unfortunately, because you are a very busy, successful guy. But having had your training 15 years ago, I can honestly say, we are going to move on to digital in a minute, but I can honestly say you have influenced the work I did and allowed me to become a marketing director at the tender age of 25 in the previous employment role, and everything that we've done at Social B up to today in terms of the presenting I do, the leadership I do, the comms I do, it's all been because of you. So I am, very appreciative of the training that my previous employer shared with me. But we're not here to talk. We are obviously here to talk about you and all your hints and tips. But what I really want to talk to Andy about today is about social media. Lots of people say to me when I'm doing training, it's not, social media is just for B2C, it's not for B2B, and that is total rubbish. I'm a B2B marketer, and we generate loads of business from our social medias. And so I didn't just want to talk about our examples. I wanted to get Andy on, because not only is he successful with what he does, but he has transposed that onto social media. So Andy, I'm here to grill you, if that's okay for today, grill you with lots of questions and have a chat about it. So what would be really interesting for me, and hopefully the people that are listening or watching today, is when did you first start dabbling with social media? When did you think, okay, this has got my attention, I need to invest some time in this?
I have had 3 waves with this. The first wave was, I don't know what that is, but the stuff that goes in the paper seems to be quite anti-social media, everybody's slagging everybody off. So that was the first wave. Second wave was, I thought, well, I'll have a bit of a go at it, and I tried a bit of everything. And one of the troubles I found in the second wave is it's very easy to copy what you see other people do. But the trouble is, the only things you see other people do is the visible stuff. So I was getting a lot of my business from the invisible stuff that none of the outside world sees, like talking to existing customers and asking if they'd like to buy something else. Talking to my mates saying, would you recommend me to so-and-so who you know? And then they bought something else. So no one saw the invisible stuff. And I had a quick look, and I realized in wave 2 that the social media stuff was taking quite a lot of my time, but it actually didn't really get me any business whatsoever. And all my business came from the invisible stuff. So I thought, well, this is just stupid. Like, why would I do something which didn't invest in anything? So I thought, I'm either going to do one of 2 things here. I'm either going to can this social media because it just doesn't work, or I'm going to, as it turned out, go into wave 3 and actually start using it properly so it leads to business. So I see social media as a great way for me to help lots of people and give them lots of ideas. But lovely though I am, hopefully someone who gets one of those ideas thinks, God, if he gives that much away free, it might be worth us having a quick chat with him. So what I found in wave 3, which is my favorite way by a long way, is I'm able to give an inordinate amount of value, but also it leads to quite a lot of business for me as well.
Perfect. So in your second wave, you said you gave all the social media channels a go. So I don't know what year that was, but you just gave them all a go and then worked out what one worked for you. How did you get?
Yeah, well, when I say gave them all a go, I mean, I'm like 51. I know I look about 83, but so I'm quite old for this game, you know? So when I first did it, what I call all, you probably think, Andy, there's about 500 other ones you haven't heard of. So I think it's something called Facebook. Is that one?
Yeah,
something called Twitter. I think I've heard of Twitter. So what I did, basically the three were Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. And then what I quickly realized was that most of my customers, when they're thinking things from a work point of view, aren't on Twitter or Facebook. My customers. Other people's might be, but mine aren't. So when they go on Facebook, they're not looking at it from a work point of view. They're looking at it from a, oh, that's nice point of view. And when they go on Twitter, they're just looking for little soundbitey stuff. And most people I work with tend not to go on Twitter much. So I quickly realized, I mean, the first rule of marketing, if you want to sell to lawyers, you go to where lawyers hang out, right? So go to the Law Society dinner, write an article in Law Weekly, talk to your law friends and say, introduce me to other law friends. Yeah. And that's what you do. And I suddenly realized none of my customers, when they're making buying decisions, really seem to be going on Facebook and Twitter, really. And then personally, I didn't like some of the things, it's a bit political this, I didn't like some of the things I was hearing about Facebook. And I thought, I'm not quite sure I'm seeing many benefits to my business and I don't feel quite right about it. So I just canned those two. And so I focused on LinkedIn because that's where, number one, my customers are looking at, number two, when they might be thinking about business. So that's why LinkedIn worked for me. It's not right for everyone, but that was my decision.
Yeah. So already in we've been chatting nearly 20 minutes now, it's gone, you've shared so much value that people don't necessarily think about. So first of all is not just putting out content and not being you touched on, so like not just copying what everyone else is doing, but giving away value and credibility. And I think lots of businesses don't think about that. They think, oh, well, if they just want my service, they'll come and find me. Well, no, they won't. I was talking to a telemarketing agency yesterday, and they are different from all the other telemarketing agencies out there. But if you just look at their website, they look just the same. So how are people going to know they're different if they're not sharing what that difference is in terms of value, not selling? And then you talked about picking the right channels and absolutely where your audience is, because again, people go, oh, Facebook's the biggest, I should be there. I always say, go fishing in the right pond, fish in the pond where your audience is and give them value and they will naturally come. So you're basically ticking all of the boxes that I talk about. And obviously you're a great salesperson and you wouldn't waste any time doing things that aren't valuable anyway. So how long have you been on LinkedIn? When did wave 3 come as such?
So wave 3 ninja level came about beginning of last year. Maybe been on it for about I've been on it for about 3 years, but seriously about 18 months. That's where we thought, right, I'm posting at least 3 or 4 things every week. I'm now going to make sure when people reply to any of my posts, I'm going to make sure that that I reply to it really quickly. And so we started doing it properly then. So about a year and a half.
Okay. And how did you decide what content to post on LinkedIn? And just for everyone's benefit, who is your target audience, if you don't mind sharing? You know, are they UK, are they international, and what type of seniority level, industries, that type of information?
Okay, so the people I'm targeting usually, not always, but usually are senior people, usually in big companies, usually in charge of sales or in charge of loads of something important. So either loads of people or loads of important projects. So it has to be someone who there's a lot riding on their success and they're at the top of that. So it might be, say, the global sales director or the European sales director of a large bank, for example, is great because that's the senior person interested in sales or achieving something working for a large company. So they tend to be my target market. And what I do when I'm talking from a sales point of view is I say to my customers, so when they're talking to their customers in a face-to-face interaction, prepare what you like, but for heaven's sake, make sure you prepare these 2 things, stories and teaching. So when you're going to a customer for the first time, and you ask loads of good questions and you find out what they want, it's very powerful when you can say, oh, you sound like Frank. And they go, who's Frank? You say, well, Frank's someone I spoke to about like 3 years ago. He said more or less word for word the same thing that you said. And since then, I've helped him make over £20 million of sales. Would it help you if I told you some of the things that Frank's found helpful? No, it's really hard for someone to say no to that. So before you go into a meeting, you think about stories. But the other thing, and this is really important with social media, of course, is teaching. So whenever you're in a sales discussion, anytime you say something and the customer looks at you and go, no, I never thought about it like that, then you're in a really good place then, because clearly you're adding value before they're giving you any money. Clearly you're differentiating yourself, because if they've never thought about it like that, it means that's different. It means nobody else has taught them that. So at the end of a discussion, if you've done stories and they go, God, I sound just like Frank, and oh, I'd never thought about that before, well, that's extremely powerful. And that's because that's what people want in real life. So then I thought, well, that's probably what they want on LinkedIn as well. So a lot of LinkedIn are, I do teaching. So I might say, here's a very simple technique to close a sale. Here's a very simple way to turn a 1-hour meeting into a 10-minute meeting. Here's a very simple way to get more referrals than you do at the minute. So it's just like teaching, because that's what people would want in real life. And with the stories that I'll use, I'll sometimes use business stories, but often what I try and do something which my publishers call Business Plus. So it has a business angle, but you can apply it to something else. So if I'm doing something on influencing skills, I might say a very simple way to convince a customer to buy something is to do blah, blah, blah. And as a handy hint, if you do the same thing with your kids, they tend to tidy the bedroom. So pretty much anyone listening to it either wants the business or they want the personal. So I'm doing a bit of a rant here. So if I was to narrow it in 2 words, stories, teaching, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all wrapped up in value at the end of the day, isn't it? It's transposing that value into, okay, well, here's Andy Bounds, he's a great sales trainer, but how do I know that? Well, I can see that firsthand through LinkedIn. And not only do you post text on LinkedIn, you post videos.
I do.
And so how far in advance do you plan your content? Is there a seasonal focus, or it is, okay, we'll just plan this a week in advance? How do you create your stories and your teaching plan?
So I will always plan. So I've got loads and loads of stuff. I've been doing this job for nearly 20 years. So I've got loads of stuff, which kind of helps. But when I'm planning, I always plan the next week. So I'm always a week ahead, and I know exactly what's going out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, definitely. Now, of course, I can adjust that if I want to. And the reason I came up with that, Linz, is it's 10 years ago this month, actually. So it's a very emotional moment for everyone in the world, in the business world. I think they're probably talking about it now, celebrating. Every Tuesday, I send out an email called Tuesday Tips. That's what I was doing for years and years and years and years, like 10 years of doing this thing. And what I used to do is I used to write it on Monday night, because I thought I want it to be current. I want all my people to know about it. But I don't know if anyone listening to this has ever experienced this. It's really hard if somebody says, be creative right now, and you've got a deadline on it. And if you're not creative in the next hour, you're going to ruin your Tuesday tip tomorrow. And I just thought, this is nuts. It's given me a stress. And there wasn't one person on my distribution list that gives a toss whether I write it the day before or the year before. I mean, if I'm talking about something very relevant, then of course I might want to, but you can plan ahead a lot, and it just takes all the stress. It's very hard to be creative when you've absolutely got to be creative. You know, it's really hard, that. So say with Tuesday Tips, even now, I've been doing them, as I said, for 10 years exactly. But what I'll often do is I've got 2 or 3 in the bank. So if I happen to get to a Monday and no creativity happens, it doesn't matter. There's no stress. Life's hard enough without putting my own stress on me. That's just nuts. Yeah, absolutely. And some companies would say, well, I've shared all my stuff. You know, I've been around for 10 years or 20 years. I've shared all my content. How can I do it again? Because they've heard it. What would you say to that? Well, the thing to remember, and this is something that took me a while to remember, it's not like, so if I emailed you once a week, Lindsay, and it was just a one-to-one exchange, if I sent you the same email like every 3 months, you might think, why do you keep on doing this, Andy? But it's not a one-to-one thing, social media. What it basically is you are opening your door and saying to the world, come and have a look at my desk if you want to. And if you don't, don't. So if there's the same thing on the desk every 3 months, it doesn't really matter. You don't have to consistently come up with new stuff all the time. So there are things I'm posting now which are variations of a theme, because if I'm going to post 4 things a week for the rest of my life, well, hopefully there's going to be another 4,000 things to go. There aren't that many different ways of saying this is how you get a customer to buy something.
Yeah.
So you want variations on a theme, but please remember, everyone, this is not a one-to-one email. I'm not emailing Lindsay here. What I'm doing is I'm just posting stuff. And if somebody says that's similar to what he did last week, or I think I've heard him say about that before, maybe the European director of sales of a large bank is going to unfollow me because they're irritated because they remember something from 90 days ago. But really, that's not very likely. So the downside of reposting is not that great. And the upside is it's much easier.
And I don't think it does any harm from my point of view. Obviously, I've been following you a long time, but I see your Tuesday tips, and your Tuesday tip today is one I've seen before. And actually, was I offended by that? No, it reminded me I should bloody do it. So like, don't book a meeting for an hour just because Outlook gives you an hour. And I'm like, yeah, actually it does no harm. It actually reminds me, yep, Andy's reminded me that. And it just, keeps your brand front of mind for people as well. So I don't think that's a bad thing. And also from your creativity side, I'm the same as you. Like, whenever you put me on a deadline, I'm not necessarily going to come up with creative content. Actually, my most creative stuff can come when I'm walking the dogs at 5 a.m, or I did a post on LinkedIn yesterday, because I tend to do I'm a bit like you. I have a bit of a routine. It's sort of written on the back of a fag packet in my head, although I know our overarching plans. And on LinkedIn, I post first thing in the morning. And before we went into COVID-19, I was traveling the world pretty much every other week. And I started doing posts like this week. I boot my laptop in, and people were commenting on it on LinkedIn, and actually they were commenting it in face-to-face scenarios. So you have to realize that people don't always interact with your social media, but doesn't mean they've not seen it and they won't then bring it up in another conversation, will they? So we started doing content like that, and then I did one yesterday. It was all about retail opening, and it didn't really come to me till I got to my laptop. I was like, oh well, we should talk about the retail and how, hints and tips on opening. So I agree, like, you can't force creativity, but don't undervalue the content that actually, like, there is a huge amount of content in everyone's brain, whatever sector they're in, that people don't always know. So try and convey that over in value and hints and tips.
Sure. And it's also remembering what your key output is. My key output of doing this is not to get likes, though obviously I hope people like it. My key thing is twofold. Number one is to provide a ridiculous amount of value that people think, I can't believe I get this from him for free. This is ridiculous. And number two, ultimately, is I want someone to get in contact and buy something. So if you're going for likes, it's very easy to go for likes or viral stuff by just say something fairly controversial. So I'm now going to date this thing if someone looks at it 3 years from now, but at the minute there's a bit of a social media storm about J.K. Rowling and some of the comments about trans and people's response to all that and so on. Now it's very easy if I wanted to get like 20, 30, 40,000 comments, I could post some comments about that, but it's not an area I know much about, and I also am not particularly interested in sharing any views on that because it's very personal and it can cause a lot of offense whichever way you go. For example, I never talk about religion, never talk about politics. So it's very easy, if you want to get lots of likes or comments, say something quite provocative about, say, Donald Trump, or say Boris Johnson, or say religion. But that's not the aim. The aim is not to get people talking about it, I don't think. Not for me anyway. My aim is to provide an awful lot of value. And secondly, that someone rings me up every now and again and says, we might want to buy your stuff. That's it. So talking about things which are not going to achieve that goal is really important. And a lot of mistakes, I mean, you know more about this than I ever will, but a lot of mistakes I see people make in marketing and in business and in selling is they think, will this get me noticed? Will this get people talking? There's no such thing as bad publicity, and I don't agree with that. Find out what your aim is from social media and then work back and make sure your posts achieve or are likely to achieve what you're trying to achieve. Yeah,
absolutely. And I was actually just going to wrap up that comment with what you just said, actually work backwards. So what is your aim? What's to generate business? Okay, well, how do I generate business? I need to generate leads. Who's my target audience? Why would they want to listen to me? And that links nicely into, obviously, you're a salesperson, Andy, an amazing salesperson, but people are not on social media to be sold to, are they? You know, if you started, you know, come and buy from Andy Bounds, you're just going to turn people off. So that value is absolutely critical. And I think people always, some businesses struggle, small and large businesses struggle with, oh, how can I give value? And I don't want to give everything away for free. But this just reminds me of the training that I had with you 15 years ago. Like, we've been doing we've doubled our free content and our free training over the last 3 months. We trained over 100,000 people last month. Majority of those were for free. And the end of my presentation on every single one says, have a value mindset, not a sales mindset. The sales will come. And people are like, oh, wow. Yeah, like, people will come. And they do. Like, we've generated business in the last 2 months. And all of that, majority of that has come through the free content we've given away. And actually, if you give away free content, you're not just giving value to those people, you actually create free marketeers, because if your content's that good, what do people do? They talk about you, don't they? And they share your content and they forward your presentation on. And then you've got, you know, marketeers around the world marketing you for free, which is, free marketing's a bonus in my book if it's targeted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, firstly, well done on that stat. 100,000 last month that's incredible. That's really good. And I love the idea about give value, don't give sales messages. I mean, any post I do never, ever, ever ends with, and if you think that's good, you might want to give me some money. Yeah. You know, it's more likely to say, so they're my favorite 3 tips for saving time in meetings. Post what you want to do below. We just had a look, coincidentally, last week or two about what the 10 most watched tips I've done on LinkedIn have been, like number of views and all that stuff, to see what the common elements are, because obviously we'll do more and more of that. And we found 3 of the top 10 were just like one sentence things like, sell me your products in 6 words or less. That was my post. And we had like 80,000 people looked at it, and we had like thousands of comments. Another one was, what advice would you give to someone starting out in sales in 10 words or less? And that thread's one of the most valuable threads I've like ever seen, because I mean, my daughter's like starting out in sales. I mean, that's how old I am. So child 1 is starting out in sales. We don't give them names anymore, Lindsay. She's just child 1. So when this thing came, I said to her, child 1, have a look at this. There is absolute dynamite here. So if you like, I'm pleased with that post. In fact, of all the posts I've done, that's probably the one I'm most pleased with, because it has more value in it when you look at all the thread of anything, because there were about 100 odd comments, and at least 2/3, 3/4 of them, every sentence on there was like, bloody hell, that is really good advice. So it's a great way for child 1 just to learn what she should be doing in sales, you know? So I was really pleased with that, because if you think of the value that's now gone out to the world because of my 20 words, it's immense. How long did it take me to write those 20 words? I don't know, about a minute. Yeah. But what a huge amount of value. And so the great thing about this is, because people will often pass comments, if you say at the bottom, so they're my thoughts, add what you think below, all of a sudden, instead of being your value, you can double the value if you get just one good comment. Well, when you get 100 comments, it's like it's 100 times the value for, frankly, no effort on your part. So as long as you remember your job is to try and host a discussion. You want a community around that post. It's not just this is what Andy Bounds thinks, go. And that's a really valuable thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And people always think they have to come up with a value, and they're just 2 huge examples of actually you don't. You can facilitate it and say, okay, you know, come up with a, you know, sell in 6 words, etc., etc. And like you say, it really, you know, people are going to see, and then they're going to scroll through all the other comments and connect with each other, and just adds huge value, which is fantastic. And it just shows that you don't have to be the value add. And it also highlights that as human beings, if you ask us a question, we're provoked to answer. Like, we like to give an opinion, we like to give a view, and we want to try and outsmart somebody else. So if you ask people to do something, our human instinct is to answer. So ask questions and ask people's views and ask them things, because they're much more likely to answer than if you just post something with no question or you know, facilitation at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a simple rule, but if you think conversation, not transmit, I found that very helpful. So yes, I want to educate, but I want to do it in a conversational way. So if I was talking to you, like a lot of our sentences are ending with a question or handing over to the other person, because that's what happens. A guy called Drayton Bird, who's pretty much the best direct marketeer ever in the history of marketing, once said to me, and I love this, he said that marketing, when you write about it, Andy, it's basically salesmanship in print. So if you weren't there printing stuff, what would you do in real life if you were a salesperson? Well, that's what you should put in your marketing. And I sort of see it that way as well. If I'm having a conversation, or we're having a conversation, it's a natural two-way thing. We sort of interrupt each other. We say, what about this? I shut up, you talk. So you want to try and instigate that, I think, if you can. And that works for me. It doesn't mean it will for everyone, but I find that's very helpful.
Yeah, no, and I concur with you wholly. I always say to people, it's about being a good networker at the end of the day, because you've got good networkers and bad networkers. So a bad networker would walk into a room, grab a coffee and say, hi, my name's Lindsay, what's your name? You'd say Andy, and I'd go, oh, what do you do? And you'd tell me. And then if you're a bad networker, you'd say, oh, and I sell, would you like to buy some training? And people go, what the hell, see ya. Yeah. Where a good networker is, oh, tell me more about that, what works, what doesn't, and you're building value, aren't you? It's not, people will run a mile if they get sold to very quickly. So you, in our email correspondence, you touched on that you don't do social yourself. Someone else does your social, which you were like, I'm not sure this would be talked about on here, but absolutely, I want to talk about it, because people think they have to do it themselves. And I'm like, no, if that's not your forte, then find someone else to do it. So tell us about how all that works then, please, Andy.
Right, okay. So the first thing is I want to talk about my guy, Ross. He's called Ross Hetherington. A while ago, he got in contact with us, actually, and said, I've noticed the way you do something. I think he saw me speak at something, and he said, that was really good. Thanks for, in effect, the free help. Let me give you some free help. If you do this and this with your LinkedIn, it'll work a bit better, or something like that. 3 or 4 conversations later, we agreed he was going to help me. And he started talking about something called algorithms or something. And I just looked at him, thought, a clue what you're talking about. And he said, it makes the numbers go up. And I went, okay, even I understand that. So we had a bit of a chat about it. So what the arrangement that we had is, if you think about, my general rule of life is you do what you're strong at and you delegate other stuff. So I'm really strong at content. I've been doing this for ages. If someone says, Andy, we need a course on this particular thing, even if it's a topic I don't know, I can turn it into training content very quickly. It's like it's something I was born with. I wish I was born with hair. Hasn't happened.
Can't have
for some
everything.
reason. No, that's right. So, but that's something I'm quite good at. So I'm quite good at coming up with content quite quickly. So I gave Ross, I said, look, these are loads of videos I've done over time. These are loads of things I've written. Tell me some topics that people are interested in. I'll create loads of stuff, but I want you to be in charge of the stuff that I'm not strong at, which is things like posting it for me, doing your fancy algorithms. Don't tell me what they are, Ross. I don't care. I just want numbers to go up. And so it's a really good combination of strengths, a bit like we were talking just before we came on air. Do you call it on air? Is that showing my age? Yeah. Where my PA, Emma, who's just brilliant, is so good with customers that, I'm not very good at typing, so that's something that I don't want to do because it's not my strength, so I want someone else to do my typing for me. But I don't want to give it to Emma because, she's quite good at typing, but she is amazing on the phone with our customers, so I don't want her amazing strength to be sidelined because she's doing my bloody typing. So what I do is I find someone who's really good at typing and sort of like upload stuff and get it sent over there, because I want every single person to work on their strengths. So I don't want to be doing algorithms. I don't want to learn what algorithms are. I don't give a toss about algorithms. I just want numbers to magically go up. So Ross can help me with that. I want my customers to love everything we do, so Emma can look after that. And typing got an amazing app called Document Direct. So, this is my favorite app, actually. What you do is you just dictate into your phone, press upload, and it goes off to some magic typing elves, I think they are, or something. And then so this morning I woke up at stupid time at 5 o'clock, I had something on my mind, sort of came downstairs, got my dictaphone app thing, just sort of talked to my phone for 10 minutes, press upload, and then just went to go and play with the kids for an hour. And then when I came back, it had all been typed by magic elves. Yeah. And so that just uses my strengths are coming up with ideas, my strengths are playing with my children, my strengths are but they're not particularly typing. Yeah, so don't let things like social media put you off. The thing to do is just always work on your strengths and don't do your weaknesses. So I'm not very good at algorithms, so Ross helps me with that. I'm not very good at typing, so I get people to do my typing for me. I'm not very good at all sorts of things, so I always delegate it to other people. So with social media, if there's anything on there that you are a bit fearful of, I would suggest that either number one, delegate it, or number two, try and work round it somehow, but definitely don't be doing stuff you're rubbish at. You wouldn't do that in any other walk of life, so don't feel you have to do it because you look around and see what everybody else is doing, think you need to copy that. There's plenty of resource out there to help you, so find someone who's good at the stuff you aren't good at. I mean, I wouldn't be doing LinkedIn if it wasn't for Ross, and I wouldn't have a successful business if it wasn't for my PA, and I wouldn't have a successful finance function if it wasn't for Emma and Alison, two of my other colleagues, and I wouldn't have a lovely garden if it wasn't for Rob, my gardener. And you know what I mean? So you find people who are good at what you're crap at and you delegate to them, and it is exactly the same with social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you've highlighted there is Ross reached out to you and said, these are the ways you can improve it, because there is 101, you know, we're a digital agency, there's 100 million of these agencies out there that claim to do stuff, and you do get generally what you pay for. So I would say if you're going to work with somebody that's going to do your social, they really need to get you and obviously understand how the social channels work, but get you in the terms of the value, because you're very generous in terms of you're giving Ross all the content, but some companies really need, or some companies or people need help in terms of what content is useful. So be asking a company for recommendations, or ask them, you know, they should be asking and grilling you. Whenever we talk to people, we're like, wow, that was a bit of a grilling. And I'm like, well, yeah, if we're gonna transpose your content online, we need to know you inside out, upside down, to know what value you've got to give people. So they're just some hints and tips if you are looking to outsource it. So you've talked about numbers, Andy. If you don't mind sharing with us, because you've said, and I'd agree, like it's not about the likes and the followers, because that's just a bit of a vain number. How many do you generate leads from LinkedIn, and do you generate business from LinkedIn?
Yeah, some. I mean, it's not as efficient for generating business as me asking my existing customers if they want to buy something else, you know, because that is super efficient. And it's not as efficient as asking my customers to recommend me to their mates, because that is more efficient. But I don't only do LinkedIn for that. So if I only wanted to generate leads, and that was the only reason I existed, there's an argument I might not do as much LinkedIn as I do. I do LinkedIn because I want to help. I've been very lucky in my business. It's given us a wonderful life and I love it all, and it's nice to contribute, but business does come from it. So we will pick up a piece of business once every handful of weeks. I think we picked up 3 one week, which was just nuts. And even at the time when we were having a bit of a laugh, we thought, well, this will never happen again. So what we do is we help tens of thousands of people every week. And I'm really happy with picking up a piece of business every now and again. That's fine. So I don't only just do it for the numbers. I also do it because I want to help loads of people. So yeah, we absolutely pick it up. But we pick up like significant things, like, you know, 5 and 6 figure contracts from big companies that hadn't heard of me until they happened to like something I'd posted. So before I started doing all this LinkedIn, I've written loads of books. Say loads, 3. Feels like loads. They're dead hard to write books.
They're very good.
When I was, well, thank you. But my word, it is a slog writing a book. But we got lots of business because there were high up people in big companies who read the book and liked it, and they got in contact with people and said, would you come and speak at our conference? So LinkedIn is almost the same sort of idea as a book. If someone in a buying capacity reads something you've written, they don't have to read a book that big, they can read a post that big, but if it triggers something in them, then they can always buy. So just as I didn't really write the book because it was only going to generate leads, I wrote it for all sorts of reasons. Well, I don't only do LinkedIn just to make sure I get the business, but it's great when it comes in, and it does fairly regularly. Yeah.
And I think, well, you've made a number of valuable points there, but I think the thing is that people, when you said you're generating, you know, some significant revenue from LinkedIn and people weren't looking, like they weren't necessarily looking. So people can go to Google and, you know, type, you know, sales trainer, blah, blah, blah. But if people aren't necessarily in that, oh, I'm going to spend, you know, 5, 6, 7 figures, they're not necessarily going to do that then and there. But actually, if they've then gone to your website and go, oh, he's on LinkedIn, and they follow you on LinkedIn and start to get a picture of you and go, wow, no, he is the person we need to be reaching out to. It's all them sort of them things you can't necessarily measure, because we have that a lot. You know, we have it a lot, much like you do. And also, I generate business from LinkedIn, and you don't always know it's come from LinkedIn. Sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. When you really drill down and say to people, where do you hear about us? You don't want to, you know, give them the Spanish Inquisition, but when you do drill down, they might go, oh, you know, I've been following you on social media for a while, or I looked at your profile, or someone else recommended me. There's all that ancillary stuff around the outside that you can't measure, but if you know it's generating, you know, if you know it's doing good, then keep doing it. And like you said, how else would you reach tens of thousands of people a week from writing a mini book or like a paragraph of value every week? You couldn't get that when I started in marketing in 2001. You know, the company that I used to work for, that I was lucky enough to have the investment with you, they were advertising in the newspaper once a week and generating 100 leads in the Mail on Sunday. And I came in, I had no marketing experience. I've been working offshore on survey vessels, came in to do their IT and said, your website's rubbish. I know that as a consumer, let's ramp things up, and then start to generate 5,000 inquiries a month. And that was without social media. Like, social media wasn't really around. SEO was around and paid advertising was around. And then we started doing the value stuff. And that's when we got in contact with you. You came in and did 3 days of bespoke training, created our presentation, which I've still got the notes somewhere on that. And we were then giving value away 3 times a month. We'd go North UK or South UK. And I remember, you know, the biggest gig I did, I think, was delivering valuable content to 500 people in Arsenal Stadium. We were doing football stadiums because they were so big. It was just giving valuable content away, and people would then buy from us. And it's basically transposing that online, and people think it's a different world, but it's no different to networking, presenting, being on the telephone, is it, at the end of the day? But you've now got this route to market that you could have, or anyone else in the world could have. It's the tactics of how you use those channels that are making the difference.
Yeah, and that's why I would, you know, really urge people to chat with you and about things like this, because you really get it in a way that I don't. I know what works for me, but whenever I give any advice, I'm always conscious of them saying, well, for me, this is what works. Whereas, you know, for person X and for person Y. And just what you said then reminds me of something. I'm doing a webinar thing tomorrow with one of my customers. And this particular customer has got a number of people in their team who slow down the sales process a bit. Like, you know, they're a little bit maybe theoretical, technician, perfection kind of people, saying, let me just think about that. I'll be a couple of weeks. I'll get back to you. I'll give you the perfect answer. And meanwhile, the customer's really like hemorrhaging money over here and says, just hurry up. Yeah. And so I've came up with this little thing, which I'm going to talk to them and say, it's no, what's a good word for this? In my experience, so this is not academic research, but in my experience, customers want at least one, probably all 3 of these 3 things, all beginning in V. If they're going to buy from you, they want value, vibe, and velocity. So they absolutely want value from you, or they're not going to give you any money. But there has to be a sense of a positive vibe. Every when they look at the website, when they look at social media, something feels right about you. And then they want you to go at the right, I would use the word speed, because velocity is a bit of a pompous word, but it doesn't begin in V. So they want like speed. So if they want to get going now, you need to be able to get going now. None of this 2 weeks, let me think about it rubbish that some people do. So the great thing about social media, it really helps with the middle V, the vibe. So people might hear about me and they might like read one of my books, or they might get a recommendation from one of their mates and all that stuff. What they're probably then going to look at is, as you say, the website and or what I'm doing on LinkedIn. And that might be the best way for them to get a vibe about me. And so it's really good for vibe. And as you say, velocity is good because it's very quick and so on. But the thing I really like about it is it's the value and the vibe, because people understand, number one, Andy gives value, doesn't he? And number 2, I get what he's like. They might like me, they might hate me, but at least they get me. Yeah. And that speeds up their decision making, either in my favor or not in my favor. But speed is good, yeah. So that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And those 3 B tips are great. Are they new things you've come up with, or something?
Yeah, I've come up with them for this week's webinar. So there'll probably be a Tuesday tip winging their way towards you.
There's a whole book there, Andy. You know, there's a book to wait for it there when you've got time.
So I think I'll just do a little post of it.
So I'm conscious of your time, and don't want to take too much more of it, but you've shared a whole plethora of tips today. So thank you for your honesty and showing how you do things. Are there any final tips that you want to share with people? Any like wrap up things? There one thing that if they do something would be useful for them?
Well, probably if you don't mind, I'll just move away from social media for a minute and just talk about general sales stuff. The thing I would urge everyone to remember with this is almost always in business, the person who's most likely to buy stuff is either someone who's already bought stuff or someone who's extremely similar to someone who's already bought stuff. It's like the customer you want is either the customer you've got or they're like the customer you've got. So what happened the minute the lockdown happened, I just rung my most important customers and said, hope you're all right. Listen, if you want, let's just pile everyone on the phone and I'll just do a quick 15, 20 minutes thing. I've been working from home for years, so I can give you some quick heads ups about how you can not feel lonely, how you can not feel a bit frustrated, how you can communicate really well, and how you can sell during a lockdown if you want me to. And what happened as a result of that is most people took me up on it. 100% of people thought I was lovely for offering it, but you know what? Nearly everyone bought something. And so that all just ties in with, if you want more sales, by all means do anything we talked about now, but the quickest way usually is to ring an existing customer and say, how else can I help you? And that almost always is the quickest, fastest, nicest, least hassle, least scary way of generating sales. And the thing that's even lovelier about this is when customers buy something, it means they get even more value. And the thing to remember with sales is when somebody gives you like 100 quid for doing something, yeah, they're giving you 100 quid, but they might got 10,000 pounds of value. So don't think sales only in your interest, it's in their interest too. So ring existing customers, offer them more value, and that is often, not always, but it's often the quickest route to helping them more than you were helping them, and you making a few sales along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing with social media is people are always after new business, but there'll be your existing business watching you as well. So I always say be a bucket, not a sieve, like keep your customers in and look after them really well, and they'll recommend you to other people. And the other social stuff can add great value, whether it's talking gigs or free webinars. And just in terms of content, just to wrap up, I've touched on that you do video content. Is if people are only doing like social media posts as text, they're missing 2/3 of their audience, because some people, and again I sort of learned this from you, like some people listen, some people watch, some people read. So when you're doing presenting, you need to tick all those boxes, but the same on social media and online. So if you're not doing video content, do it. It's not hard. And we've got some free webinars on our website to know how to do that. If you're not doing podcasts, do it, because although the podcast stats have gone down a little bit because of COVID, like me, I used to listen to hours of podcast content when I was traveling all over the world. And I listen to travel podcasts at the moment because I'm desperately missing travel, but I do still listen to the inspirational stuff as well and do blog content. And all of that content can really help you on your social media channels. So thank you so much for today, Andy. It's been lovely talking to you and catching up with you. I feel very privileged to have an hour of your time, because I know it is very precious. If people want to know more about you, obviously they can follow you on LinkedIn looking for Andy Bounds. I think there's only one of you. But where else can they find out about you, Andy?
Well, LinkedIn's probably best and quickest, or if they can send me an email if they've got any questions from what we talked about. That's just andy@andybounds.com. So andy@andybounds.com will just come through LinkedIn. They're probably the best ones. I mean, I've got websites and I've got online sales training videos and stuff, but probably go to me through LinkedIn, or the email address is easiest, and then we can have a chat. And probably I'll tell you stories and teach you something, because that's what I always do.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Tuesday tips are, value in themselves amongst a whole load of stuff. So I'm always looking, when I'm scrolling through LinkedIn, I'm always looking for Andy's stuff. So I can definitely concur with the value there. Lovely. Well, thank you so much for your value and insight today and your precious time, Andy. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.